Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the next share on the works of Revolba, the topic of Mahu Odom. What does it mean to be a human being? We were in the handout sheets. We were on the top of page Kafvov, page 26. Sorry, not the top, the middle of page 26, page Kafvov. The letter beginning Vov, Ois Vov, letter Vov. And Revolba quoted a. Let me just get my recording going. Apologies.
Alei, Shur, he wrote Alei, Shur.
So we were on the top of the middle of page 26, Kafvov, letter Vov. Revolba quoted a Gemara in Yevamos, which says as follows: V'omer Rabbi Lazar. This is the middle of the page, just after the letter Vov. V'omer Rabbi Lazar, Kol Odom she'ein lo karka eina Odom. Any person who doesn't have land is not an Odom. Shenema, as the pasuk says, Hashomayim shomayim laHashem, v'ha'oretz nosan livnei Odom. So what does it mean to be a human being? This is the topic of the chapter, Mahu Odom. What is an Odom? And Rabbi Elazar's argument to this, the answer to this question in the Gemara in Yevamos is, Kol Odom she'ein lo karka. If you don't own land, then eina Odom. You're not called a person. Meaning to say, that only if you have karaka, if you own land, are you an Odom, are you a person? And the source of this is, Hashomayim shomayim laHashem. The heavens were given to, for God rather. Va'oretz, but the land, nosan livnei Odom, was given to human beings. And therefore you see only those who receive this gift of oretz, of land, can be called Odom, can be called a human being. Someone who doesn't have land is not an Odom. And this is a most bizarre and difficult medrash. It's a Gemara, a medrash, most bizarre and difficult idea to understand. What does this mean that an Odom is only called an Odom if they own land? So we've seen, we've been on a long journey with Revolba. He's quoted to us numerous chazals and statements from the sages about what it means to be a person. We've looked at, in the previous mini-series, the language of the psukim in the Torah. And here we come to a most difficult source of all. One's only a human if one owns land. So we touched on this right at the end of last week. And Revolba's answer to this question is going to be that a person, a human, grows from the ground, just like a tree or a plant does. A person also needs a place to go from. Without that place, the person doesn't have somewhere from which to function, from which to operate, and therefore isn't an Odom in their fullest. And Revolba very beautifully then goes on to understand this idea that essential to avoda, essential to self-growth, is to make sure that one is not living in the Shamayim. The pasuk, after all, told us, Hashomayim shomayim laHashem. The heavens are for Hashem. V'ha'oretz nosan livnei Odom. What did God give us? He gave us the land. He gave us physicality. And here Revolba reminds us of the idea that true spirituality has to be grounded. It has to be earthed. If we think that spirituality means somehow cutting ourselves off, detaching ourselves from being creatures of the earth, being creatures of the ground, then we've misunderstood what true ruchnius, what true spirituality is. And this is a perpetual battle within a human being. There can be those of us who are too embedded in the earth, too much caught up in the ground. I mentioned right at the end of the last year when we first touched on this, that the language used by Chazal in the Mishnah and the language used by all languages, many languages, to describe someone who is coarse and unrefined and unsophisticated and not developed and lacking sensitivity, including spiritual sensitivity, is an ha'oretz, a peasant, a person of the land. People who become very earthy, become immersed in physical pursuits, a farmer, all day they're just engaged in physicality, they risk becoming very physical beings. That indeed is why there's the idea of the Shemitah, which we learn about in next week's Sedra, that once every 7 years, the farmer needs to take a sabbatical, needs to step out of the land so that they don't become immersed in this physicality. So being a person of the ground is a dangerous thing. But equally speaking, that is the reality of what it means to be a human being. And if we think that spirituality is found by trying to float in the air, then we've misunderstood it. We haven't understood what true spirituality is about. And this, therefore, is Revolba's thought, Revolba's idea over here. Rabbi Elazar is telling us, as he explains, a person has to have karka, We all need to have our little patch, our allotment patch. We need to ensure that we get our fingers dirty sometimes. We can't detach ourselves completely from the nature, from physicality, from the world that's going on around us. And we can misunderstand what spirituality is if we don't realize this. And this is a temptation we can face in one of two directions. We can be drawn to being so much earthed that we've lost spirituality. We are the Ha'aretz, with the peasant. But equally, we can become detached from the earth. We can become mistaken in our understanding of what spirituality is. We can begin defining spirituality as it's only about what takes place in the shul. It's only about what takes place in the Beit HaMidrash, in the yeshiva, in the sem. And forget that real spirituality takes place in our lives. Rav Hirsch, in a very famous essay, wrote that he wishes, remarkable line, he wishes sometimes that he could shut shuls. Because we think that that's where Judaism belongs. It belongs in the shul. But actually, it belongs in our homes. It belongs in our regular, physical, material life. And therefore, a person has to make sure they're grounded, that they're physical, they're embedded in the real world, and they elevate and lift that up to make it spiritual. If we don't lift it up, then we're Ha'aretz, we're just the peasant. But if we only exist in the heavens and the Shemayim, then we're not elevating, we're not being true to our inner self. And I think with Volber's idea, it goes further than that. Our lives in the West are very detached from being in touch with nature and physicality. In the past, human beings operated on farms, they operated in the physical world. They were aware of the world and nature around them and physicality around them. They couldn't blind themselves to it. They saw sunrise and sunsets. They saw the moon and the cycle of the moon. And they saw the cycle of life. We are removed from that. We're detached from that. So we don't notice what's going on. We like living in our sanitized existence. And this is something that carries risks because we don't really notice what's going on around us. And that can lead us to ignore sometimes the consequences of actions and what it really means to be existing in the world. This takes place on many levels. It can be the delusion we have of thinking that the world has become suddenly a safer place, a place in which there isn't the same suffering. We perhaps outsource. We like the labor, the child labor going on, the difficulties of the world, the poverty. We like that taking place in the distance where we don't know about it. It still happens, there's still child labor, but as long as it's in a faraway country, we're okay with it. And that's something unhealthy. And forgive me if I mentioned this already last week, I think so many halachas are about trying to ground us. And just one example of this is shechita. Shechita gets bad press. And the reason it gets bad press is not because it's more painful than other ways of killing an animal, quite the contrary, but because it's a very physical process. It squirts blood all over the place. And the other ways of killing an animal seem to be more sanitized and cleaner. And perhaps this is the very reason why the Torah wants this to take place. Why this is the method that we need to kill an animal. We shouldn't think that meat just arrives vacuum packed in the shops. We should know that it's a physical process taking the life of an animal. Because it's important for us to understand that, because only then do we realize the responsibility of what we're doing. If we're detached from nature and we don't realize what's going on, then nothing reminds us of the privilege of what it means to be a human being and how we're using the world, which Hashem indeed has gifted to us. But therefore, we have to live up to the responsibilities. And this, therefore, says Rav Wolbe, is this statement of Rabbi Lezer, Kol Odom she'eino karka, eino Odom. So we're just going to read that inside and try and see how he expresses it. So this is letter Vav in the middle of the page. Gam makomo shel ha'odom hu chelek mimenu. The place of someone is part of them. Or makomo shel odom hu ha'karka, hu mokum gedulo hu mokum avodaso. The place of a person is the ground, the earth, which is the place from which they grow and can work. Mahu inyan makomo shel odom legabe avodaso. What is the place of a person with respect to the avodah? Yispar b'perikas. We'll deal with that later. But kam namid ala kesher odom el ha'karka. Here we're going to focus on the connection of a human being to the ground. Rabbi Lezer korach shtei oimos b'yachad. Rabbi Lezer linked two statements together, one of which we're not going to go into for today, Zeh shel misha ein le'isha, the importance of marriage in one's spiritual life, V'zu shel misha ein lo karka. And he explains the connection between them. And here we'll jump to the next paragraph. Tomid his hirosonu moron Rabbi Yerucham zatzal. My teacher, says Rav Wolbe, Rabbi Yerucham, Rabbi Yerucham Leibovitz, the mashgiach in the Mir yeshiva in Europe, where Rav Wolbe learned, always used to tell us, Alei yesod hagadol b'avodah, on the important principle of self-work, rak lo letafis l'shamayim, not try to leap heavenwards. Then he brings it in the Yiddish, no nicht kriechen in Himmel, not to move oneself into heaven. He says this warning has a great depth. Anyone enters into serving Hashem with great force, hopefully faces a tremendous longing and desire and almost hunger for a relationship with God and for elevated achievements. And what does this person picture is the service of Hashem, pouring out one's heart in prayer, this masrus Torah and dedication to Torah learning, and maisim shel derech eretz v'chesed nirim lo kabitl Torah. Actions of engaging in the world and chesed, kindness, seem a bittul Torah. We think it's a waste of our time, that we so much of our time have to spend on just managing our affairs, sorting things out, earning a living, interacting with people, looking after ourselves. That all seems such a terrible waste of time. Why can't we just be focused on the things that really matter? On mitzvahs and on Torah and on davening. And such a person blinds themselves to their true condition. That we are made of bodies and bodily forces. We ignore our house and our home and our surroundings, our environment, and our responsibilities to them. Such a sense of spirituality is trying to leap to the heavens, and it can't possibly succeed. At the moment when a person is most elevated, a person can't forget that they're standing on the ground. And the world we live in is the world of actions. The greatest closeness found to the Creator, a person finds it only at the driest spiritual moment, as we run to some act of chesed, or turning over into the next page of Ravalba, page Chafzain, or his masrus le'evazavar mitzvah, or dedication to some mitzvah, where the where our whole thought is just focused on doing the good deeds we need to do, without any elevated thoughts. That is paradoxically the most spiritual moment. A person who doesn't have grounding under their feet is not a true person. Doesn't have the ground in their lives is not a true Adam, is not what we mean when we talk about a spiritual person. So this is a profound idea of Revolba. I think, by the way, this idea is expressed in Rashi. In Rashi, on the beginning of Parshas Vayera, the pasuk tells us, "Vayera Hashem al Avram be'elonu mamri v'hu yoshev pesach oil k'chom hayom." Hashem appears to Avram, and then suddenly Vayisa Eino Vayah. Avram lifts up his eyes and he sees there are three people approaching him. He doesn't know the malachim, he doesn't know the angels, he thinks they're regular people. And Avram runs forward to greet them and invites them into his tent. And the question Rashi asks is that the psukim don't make sense. God appears to Avram, Vayera Hashem al Avram, and then it doesn't say what he said. Hashem's just there, present. And then suddenly we see Avram lifting up his eyes, seeing the three people, Vayarat Sikosum, he runs to greet them, and he's engaged in Achnosas Orchim. So what was the nevuah? What prophecy? Why did Hashem appear to Avram? What was said in this prophecy? And Rashi answers, Godzel Achnosas Orchim Yosem Mikabalos Bnei Ashchina. That indeed this is correct. Avram said to Hashem, 1 minute, God, I know I'm about to have a nevuah, you've just appeared to me, but something more important has come up. Achnosas Orchim. That means to say that that moment of physical Achnosas Orchim, that moment in which I am running forward and greeting my guests. Who are these guests? Desert travelers who Avram is going to bring them water to wash the dust off their feet. And he's going to go and slaughter an animal and cook food and bake bread. That's greater than receiving prophecy, greater than the moment of maximum closeness between the human and the divine. And it's a remarkable thought, this Rashi. Sometimes we might feel we long for ruchnis, we long for spirituality. I mean, think if only we lived 3,000 years ago in the Nevi'im, when prophets walked the earth, and there were people that could speak to Hashem and hear his response. And sometimes maybe we long for that sort of spirituality. And Rashi tells us, I'll give you that. You have a route to get an encounter with Hashem greater than prophecy. Wow. And what is that? Bringing a bowl of water to wash dust of the Ovdei Avodah Zarah, of the feet of idol worshippers, as Avram thought they were, coming to visit him in his tent. So this is a remarkable contemplation. True spirituality is found in Hachnosas Orchim, more than Kabbalah's Pnei HaShechina. And to do that, we need to engage in activities that earth us, that make us in touch with nature, in touch with the physical world. Not to become Amaratzim, not to become immersed in it, but to stand with our feet firmly planted on this ground, on this karka. So this is the idea as expressed by Rav Olber in this paragraph. He now, I think, summarizes the topic in at the top of now on the top of page Kaf Zayin, Ois Zayin. Before I go further, though, maybe I'll just pause if there are any questions on this last section we've read. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next subsection. Okay, so Rav Olber moves on, and in letter Zayin, he takes us one stage further, and this is really a fantastic piece. And he explains a thought of the Shlah to help us understand the next section. The Shlah stands for Shnei Luchos Habris. It's the name of a sefer written by Rabbi Shaya Halevi Ish Horovitz, a Makubal, long-distant Talmud of the Arizal, the Kabbalist from Sfat. The Shlah never met the Ari, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, but he learnt from his Kosovim, and he was a Makubal, a Kabbalist. And he says a thought about the meaning of the word Odom. And we're going to learn what the Shlah has to say about this. And he says, "B'sikum shel kol ma shenisbar b'perek zeh." The summary of everything we've learned in this chapter, nisbonim b'shoresh minas Odom. Let's reflect on the word Odom itself. Hashlah, the Shnei Luchos Habris, Rabbi Shai Horovitz explains, Vayikra es shemam Odom. Hashem called the human being Odom. Zehu perush al toldos Odom v'sofo. This single verse explains us everything we need to know about the genesis of a human being and what they can become. Im dovuk hu lamala, if a human being cleaves to that which is above them, or mistameh lo yisparach, and becomes similar to God, becomes doimeh, parallel, similar to God, leilech b'drachav, to go in his ways, nikra shmoi be'etzem Odom. Then he is called Odom, miloshen adameh le'elyon. One way of translating Odom is Adam. I will imitate. I will copy. Who should we copy? God. What does that mean? Leilech b'drachav, to go in his ways. And therefore, Nikra Shmoi Odom, that's why we're called Odom, because we were meant to parallel and consciously mimic a human being. And indeed, we saw the pasuk that told us from the Novi, we saw Yechezkel in the earlier chapters, who's described as the best of men. He is the person who has the title of Ben Odom, of a human being. And in his prophecy, when he saw, as it were, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sitting on his Kisei HaKavod, this is a metaphor, the best words he could find to express what Hashem was the peak of what a human being can aspire to be, Odom. V'al Kisei Demus Odom. And on the throne of glory sits a appearance of a human being. I'm not going to go into this whole explanation now. We discussed this previous. Those who are interested, I can send you recordings of that statement. But for now, what we need to draw out of this line of the Shlah is that a human being in their peak, at their best, is Adameh. Adam, Adameh. I will imitate. I will copy God and try and be doimeh, similar. I will mimic him. The imu mafrid atzmim in adveikus. But if a person separates themselves from being davuk, cleaving to Hashem, Oz nikra Odom al shem ha'adama. Then a person is known as Odom because we are earthy. Ashalokeach misham, that we are lukach mikom, that we are taken from there. That's where we're created from. Ve'efehu ala offer yoshuv, and if you offer hu offer yoshuv, a person is made of dust, and we return to dust. Omnon shem Odom hamora al adama le'enyon zehu ha'ikar tachlis. The name of an Odom, which is derived from being similar, godlike, that's the main and primary person of what a person should be. Because evil was only created for the sake of good. So here the Shlah is saying as follows. He's saying a human being can be one of two extremes. We can be copiers of the divine, or we can be earth, embedded in the earth, drawn and created from dust and ending up as dust. Both of them reflect aspects of ourselves, but the primary one is Adame, our ability to become similar to God, to have spirituality and ruchnius in our lives. However, we also have the option of becoming embedded in the ground, Adama, earth beings, Amoritz, people who are immersed in physicality. Which is the primary aspect of a human being? Says the Shur, certainly Adame, our spiritual potential, because evil is only ever a means to good. Why do we have an aspect of ourselves that's physical? Why do we have a part of ourselves that's capable of earthiness? In order we can then elevate that to become something spiritual. Were we not to have an earthy physical aspect which could draw us and suck us in, then we wouldn't face any meaningful choice. And without choice, moral decisions, spiritual decisions have no meaning, and therefore we need that side to ourselves. But our true selves is our ability to imitate God, Adame. Now I just want to make a few points about the Shur. The first thing is this is very profound. One of the most basic aspects of what it means to be a human being is to be mimics. From very young, we copy, we learn by copying. A little baby of days old, or maybe even from the moment of birth itself, is already absorbing everything going on around it and trying to copy it. A baby learns maybe at 5-6 weeks, smiling. It picks up language through copying, through imitating that which goes on around us. And so we go through life. So very profound, very much at the heart of what a person is copying. Obviously, we make the choices. What do we copy? Adame, do we say I'm similar to God? Or do we copy something else which ends us up with us being Adama, just being physical beings? So this is the first point in the Ramah, in the Shur. The Shur is touching on something very profound. If we think about it, it's at the heart of our existence. We are conscious of that which is around us. And next week, when we take this further, we'll look in more detail at this, always weighing up and measuring what we want from that which is around us and copying. It's very fundamental to what we are. We're conscious the whole time of things that are going around us and always aware of it and trying to absorb it and make sense of it. We're mushba, we're influenced by our surroundings. That's why it's so important that we find ourselves in good and appropriate surroundings. Adame, we choose to copy. What do we choose to copy? Hopefully Hashem. Point number one. The alternative is Adama, earth. Now, in this form of the meaning of the word Adam, the aleph at the beginning is part of the root, Adama. In the other meaning of the word, Adame, the real root word, the verb is dome, to be similar, to copy. And the aleph at the beginning is I, Adame, I will copy. In the other meaning of the word, Adama, ground, earth, the aleph is part of the root. There's no I in it. Why is that? The Shur's explanation is not symmetrical. Adame means I will copy, and that's one meaning of the word Adam. Adam, I will copy. And the other meaning of the word Adam is earth, Adam, Adama. Where's the aleph in it? Where's the I in that? And number one. And number two, surely the meaning of the word Adam should just be Adama, just a copy. And the struggle we face in life is, who do we copy? What draws us after? Who do we follow? Do we choose to imitate God, or do we choose to imitate and make ourselves similar to less good influences? So why aren't they both referred to as Adame? And the answer, and this is the secret and part of what the Shur is telling us, is that in the second option, in the option of Adama, the whole point is that there is no I found there. It isn't me expressing myself, because all long choices are being drawn after, rather than actively exerting oneself with a decision of control to transcend one's instincts and rise above oneself. It's almost a rule of thumb that the default setting is going to be the wrong decision. Very often we can think when we're making the wrong decision that this is me. This is what I want to be. I'm not going to be restricted and bound by rules. I'll let myself be a free spirit and express myself. But then I'll always revert to the default. And if we think about it, so many other temptations we face in life are the non-choice options, whatever our particular challenges may be. If we're drawn after physical pleasure, we become enslaved by the physical pleasure. It draws us after it. And we may think, this is an expression of myself, what pleasure am I going to have? But in fact, we're making ourselves subservient to it. It's calling to us and we can't help but follow, being drawn after it. Well, the alternative is we can master it. We can decide how we're going to use it and allocate it to the correct proportion. Example number 1, laziness. The default setting of just not bothering to exert ourselves, to transcend ourselves, just to keep lethargically what we're doing, again, is the non-expression of ourselves. We're not choosing to master our situation. Anger, we're being controlled by that which is going on beyond ourselves. Someone is doing something and I feel overwhelmed. That's almost the emotion of anger. It's feeling overwhelmed by a force beyond my control, and I just let myself go with it, rather than exercising my control, thinking it through, calming myself down. Arrogance, seeking approval from others, only being able to feel I have an existence when others are aware of me, or others are admiring me, and so on and so forth, with all the negative quality traits that we have. So almost always, every wrong decision is thinking that I'm expressing myself, but in truth, adama, being purely passive, rather than adame, I choose to do something. I choose to do what? To model myself on the Creator, to build myself by transcending my physicality, my adama, and becoming something bigger than that. And this is the idea that the Shur says in this paragraph. Let's carry on reading the Shur, or maybe I'll just actually pause for a moment if there's any questions on this, and otherwise we'll carry on reading how Revolba takes this Shur onwards. Carries on Revolba. Ika ha'adam, the main part of a person, who dovuk lamano mistamalo yisparach, is cleaving to that which is above and being similar to God, modeling ourselves in God. Begeda adame, in the definition of I will copy, I will mimic, I will model myself in God. Hayesod lisdamus, the foundation of our ability to model ourselves in God, who kedushas hanashama yodis, shemitzheva devuka b'kadosh baruch hu, is the sanctity of our soul, which from its very nature is cleaved to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kedusha pnimis zu, this inner holiness, is what pushes a person to model and make themselves similar to God. So we're not going to go into this in too much detail now, other than that the idea that as a human being I can become godlike is not something obvious at all. What allows me to be godlike is the fact that I have a spiritual aspect to my existence, and this is what we call an neshama. This is a slightly separate subject. Nisponen orega. Now Revolba shifts into a very important philosophical discussion. What is it that means that we have to have good quality traits? All of us feel within ourselves a sort of instinct. It's almost axiomatic to us human beings that we need to be good. But actually, what does it mean? What is the imperative to be a good person? And here in about 12 lines, which is the next paragraph of Revolba, he takes us on a real tour de force, on a summary of everything the philosophers and psychologists have said on the subject. He shows his complete mastery of the whole literature, and then tells us what the Torah has to say about it. So here we're asking a very basic and profound question. Why should I be good? Why should I be moral? There are many answers to this question. There are those who answer this question by saying we are social animals. Society can't survive if everyone just lived based on their whims and what they wanted, without thinking and considering the other. So one answer to the question is we human beings want to live in society. The only way society can possibly work is by us controlling our urges and taking into consideration other people's needs and other people's views. And therefore, we have to keep morals. Now, undoubtedly, there is truth to that. We humans are very social animals. We're very social creatures. We can't exist alone. And if every person would just do that which they wanted without consideration of others, it would be impossible for society to function. And therefore, the basic and only moral imperative is don't harm others. Do what you want, whatever you want, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. And this is a model of morality. Sometimes this is spoken about as the social contract. It's almost a deal that we make. You don't interfere with me, don't disturb me, and I won't interfere with you. We have an unspoken contract between ourselves. if I would begin interfering with your life, you would interfere with mine. None of us would be able to get on. And in a sense, therefore, the best way to maximize our ability to function is to agree to this unspoken condition. Why do we punish someone who does wrong? Not because fundamentally we have really a right to pass judgment and say what they're doing is wrong, but they're disturbing us. It's breaking down the social contract, the discord. It's not good for anyone, and therefore in the interests of the majority, it's worth imprisoning, putting out of the way, or punishing or killing someone who breaches this unspoken social contract. This is a model of morality and has some truth to it. The next model, apikorosim, and by this he doesn't mean what we refer to as in colloquial Hebrew as an apikoros. We use that as a word for heretic, but he means, he says in brackets, klomar apika hayavoni, the Greek philosopher, the Talmidov and his followers, Epicure, the Greek philosopher. The Hebrew word apikoros possibly derives its origin from the philosophy of this Greek thinker, Epicure. Tanu, they claimed, ki midas rois mafrias lahana melea min ha'olam. The reason we should have good ethical midot is because this is the best way to maximize our pleasure. If we have bad character traits, they will interfere with our pleasure. The kivan sherau batanud bilti mufra tachlis achaim, and since these philosophers saw in uninterrupted, undisturbed pleasure the purpose of life, therefore they demanded from a person that they should have good qualities of attributes. Meaning to say that their argument is that the way to maximize pleasure is to have good midot. If you have bad midos, if you have bad character traits, you won't be able to enjoy life to its fullest. How so? If you get angry, you'll frustrate yourself. You'll ruin your own pleasure in life. If you're arrogant, you won't be able to do that which you really want. You'll just be thinking about what other people expect. If you're lazy, you won't be able to get on with life and experience the amazing wonders of the world and maximize your enjoyment of those. And so on and so forth. So each bad midah ultimately is not just about morals and ethics. It's also about being able to live as a functioning, healthy, happy human being. And therefore they argued that this is the basis of good qualities of ethics. This is a second model of midas, and again, undoubtedly there's truth to that. If we don't have good midas, we won't be able to appreciate life as it is. Then remarkably, Revolt brings in this list, Lehavdil, he says, very different, is Shlomo HaMelech, the view of Shlomo HaMelech. Kosav b'Sefer Chochma Shlomo, he wrote in his work of his wisdom, Kilo Sova Chochma b'Leiv Ra. Wisdom can't come into an evil heart. This is a different argument for why we should be ethical beings. We need the best possible midas to be able to aspire to intellect and intelligence. An important part of a human being is intelligence and intellect and development of intellect. In many respects, there's a tremendous fulfillment and pleasure in enriching our minds and developing them to the fullest. And we can only do so if we have good midas. If we find ourselves constantly drawn after physical pursuits and physical pleasures, if we're lazy, if we're angry, if we're arrogant, we won't be able to maximize ourselves intellectually. And therefore Shlomo put forward an argument that the reason not to have a leiv ra, bad character traits, is because lo sover hachachma b'leiv ra. True wisdom can't be found in an evil person. A very powerful point, but still Revolver is going to argue not the full depth of why midas are important. So we've said theories so far, some Jewish, some non-Jewish, but all of them have some truth to them. It is true that we can only function in society if we work on our midas. It is true that we can only maximize our pleasure, as per Epicurus, the Greek philosopher, if we develop our midot. It's true we can only find true chokhmah, as per Shlomo HaMelech, L'havdil, if we maximize our good midas. Nonetheless, none of this is enough. Socrates Omar, he now quotes Socrates, Sheyesh bo koach tahomi, there's an inner force, hamoino ma'ovel, that prevents a person from doing evil. And with this, Socrates is revealing, he's the first writer we know about who discusses the philosophy in philosophical depth, this idea, what we call conscience. Another answer to what and why we should develop good midas, because for some unknown reason we have within ourselves a conscience. We have a voice telling us that to do good is not right, even though it doesn't really reflect any any truth or justification in itself. Says Rav Wolbe, Yesh b'chol shittos ein nukudos emes. There's no doubt that each of these views have much truth to them. They have points of truth in them. Aval af achas ein speaker, but none of them by themselves are enough. Afilu al hamatzbun, even conscience, which perhaps comes the closest to the truth, because it's reflecting something very profound and deep about us humans that want to do that which is right. Hiksha hakuzari, the Kuzari asks on it, Im shtei umas nilchamas zu im zu. Yehud Alei in his work, the Kuzari says, two nations fighting with each other. The conscience of each side, each army, each soldiers demands them to kill the enemy against them. Which one is the correct one? And he says, therefore, none of these are sufficient, even though all of them have truth to them. So what is the answer to the question? The Torah says that we need to walk in the way of God. This includes all good quality traits. This mitzvah includes all aspects of chesed, walking in kindness, doing good to others, which within the makeup of a human being, we are qualified to do acts of chesed. So here Rav Wolbe is saying 2 points. The first point is saying that the essence of what we are aware of in Hashem is that He is an altruistic giver. He created the world and gave us the gift of life for no benefit of His own. And therefore chesed is the primary midah that we see in Hashem. And therefore, when we are driven to mold ourselves, to mimic, to copy God, and develop our personalities, our quality traits, our midas in line with His, the first and most important and primary of those is chesed. We've spoken about this before when we learned Rav Dessler's Kuntres HaChesed. Rav Wolbe, in his one line, is alluding to this idea. And therefore, we need to adopt the midah of chesed, number one. Number two, we are capable of acts of chesed. Because it's very nice saying we have to copy chesed, but are we able to do so? And the answer is we are capable of acts of chesed. Humans are capable at our best of acting altruistically for no benefit of ourselves. And therefore, this is a midah, a quality trait that we can copy. However, Hashem also has other quality traits. He has the quality of justice, strictness, strict justice, of truth, of turning to the world and saying you're not living up to expectations, of din. What about those quality traits? Why don't we have to copy Hashem in those things also? And the answer to this is twofold. Firstly, they are only a means to an end. Hashem really created the world to give us kindness. However, that kindness can only exist if we're able to make choices. Only if we can make choices are our decisions and our lives meaningful. And therefore, our choices have to have impact. And the impact the choices have on the world and ourselves can be devastating. Because the choices are real, they have to have a result. And this is what we refer to as din and mishpat. So this is a secondary midah, rather than the primary midah that of himself that Hashem has revealed. And this is mimicked and reflected in our personality also, as Rav Wolbe is about to explain, in that we're not capable of achieving true emes, a remarkable idea. We're not capable of doing true mishpat. Now it is true, you need a court system. We need to apply mishpat. We need to run a society. However, in truth, we human beings can't do mishpat, because we can never know everything that's meant to go into the equation. We can never fully judge someone and their situation. So we do mishpat because we have to do something with someone here. But in truth, we don't really know everything that's gone into it, what life experience happened, what's really going on inside them in their own minds, why they're behaving in this way, what's impacted on the decision, to what degree they had free choice in the decision, what else was going on, and why they behaved in that. Only the Keldeus, only Hashem, who really knows the minds, can know everything and arrive at truth with a capital T, at mishpat, at justice with a capital J. And therefore, we human beings are not called upon to copy, to mimic that aspect of how Hashem runs the world, because we're not capable of it. It isn't implanted in our essence. Why not? Because it isn't the primary purpose of creation. It's a means to an end. And we're incapable ever of knowing the full truth. We can never know everything there is to know about a situation. We can't reach truth. We can aspire to truth. We can try and draw as close to it as we can, but we can't ever touch it. And here, let's just read these lines of Rav Wolbe before we finish off today. A person from the essence is capable, is qualified to do acts of chesed. We'll miss out the brackets for now. However, b'midas ha'emes v'hamishpat ein mitzvah shel halicha b'drachav. In the qualities of truth and justice, we're not commanded to walk in His, i.e., in God's ways, because a person is not qualified to be perfect in them. And this is a very important and profound idea. In the brackets, which we missed out, Revolba links this to the famous Medrash, in which Hashem turned to different heavenly qualities and asked them whether He should create human beings. And when He turned to Emes, to the truth, and when He turned to Mishpat, they said, don't create a human being. They're not up to it. When they turned to Chesed, Chesed responded, yes, create human beings, because human beings are capable of great kindness. And this is an incredible idea. A human being is capable of achieving and succeeding in achieving true Chesed, to truly rise beyond ourselves. Emes, Mishpat, these are ultimately too far for us human beings to achieve, and therefore we're not called to mimic Hashem in this. I'll just stop here because I've been asked a couple of questions on the chat, and then we'll draw this to a close. The first question that was asked was, isn't Talmud Torah also valued? How does this fit in? And this was asked on the first part of the Shur, in which we were looking at Rabbi Lezer's statement that a person has to make sure that they have karka, land. And the answer is, of course, Talmud Torah is valued. And thank you for giving me the chance to correct this if I didn't make this clear. Of course, Talmud Torah is valued. Of course, mitzvahs are valued. However, they can only be achieved and only make sense if they are speaking to an earthed human being, to someone who is aware of themselves as a physical body, and therefore to them the Torah can elevate themselves. If Torah is making us detached, is uprooting us from our roots which are meant to be in the ground, then that isn't true Torah. We say Derech Eretz Kod Mola Torah, which means lots of things, but part of what it means is Derech Eretz, the way of the world. We need to be engaged in worldly existence in order for us to then grow on that Torah. And if there's no Derech Eretz, there's no Torah. Equally, though, it is true, if there's no Torah, then Derech Eretz itself, it can't exist, because it ceases to be Derech Eretz, and it will just become coarseness and baseness. The second question I was asked privately is, what about midas that aren't to do with chesed, like laziness or approval seeking? How are these emulating Hashem? The answer is, we spoke about chesed as an example of these, but ultimately, all these negative qualities mean that we are self-centered as opposed to focusing out. And this is the point of chesed. Chesed is about transcending ourselves, reaching out beyond ourselves, rather than just acting in our own self-interest. And therefore, these midas ultimately come under the halachah of Drachav that we've just spoken about before. That's a very short answer to really what deserves a longer response. And for those who are interested, as I said, I can send a link to my Shur, in which I did 2 series back on the conscious chesed of Rav Desva, when we spoke about this at great length. I don't want to go through all that here, other than to say that just to remind ourselves where we're up to, and that will allow us, please God, to finish off this topic next week. Revolba has told us the very beautiful idea of the Shlo, the Makubal, the Kabbalist from Germany, Rabbi Shai Halevi Horowitz, who says a human being can be Adame, I choose to elevate myself, to actively and proactively transcend my selfishness, to become similar to Hashem, primarily in the middle of Chesed, or Adama, I can choose to be the passive, non-responsive, non-in-control piece of earth, which is the second option of what a human being can be. I'm going to stop there then, and unless anyone has any questions that they want to ask by either by text or live. Okay, we'll stop there, and I wish you all a good evening. Thank you so much for joining, and please God, we'll resume next week.